The National Bank Open was supposed to be one of the biggest stops of the North American hardcourt swing, but suddenly, fans had a very different question on their minds. What happens when one of the tournament's biggest crowd magnets is no longer on the court? Eala's presence had become a major storyline in Toronto, with Filipino fans turning up in huge numbers and creating an atmosphere that was impossible to ignore. And after Eala's campaign came to an end, the reaction from fans raised an even bigger question about just how much her presence meant to the tournament. This wasn't simply another early round exit. Eala arrived in Toronto as one of the hottest young players in women's tennis, and by the time her run ended, she had become one of the event's biggest talking points. So, is the National Bank Open really in trouble without Eala, or are fans simply reacting to the sudden disappearance of one of the tournament's most passionate fan bases? Let's break down what happened, why Eala became such a major attraction in Toronto, and why her absence could be felt far beyond the scoreboard. To understand the reaction, you have to look at the incredible momentum Eala brought with her into Toronto. She entered the National Bank Open as the number 25 seed and ranked number 28 in the world, a remarkable position for a player who has been climbing the rankings at a rapid pace. Earlier in the season, she had already produced historic results, including a run to the fourth round of Wimbledon, a milestone that made her the first Filipina to reach that stage at the tournament. She had also won the WTA 125 Birmingham title and made a deep run in Berlin, where she defeated top players including Elena Rybakina and Alina Svitolina. So when Eala arrived in Toronto, she wasn't just another name in a stacked WTA 1000 draw. She was carrying serious momentum, national pride, and an enormous amount of attention from Filipino tennis fans around the world, and Toronto quickly showed just how powerful that support could be. The National Bank Open is already a major event, but Eala's matches created an atmosphere that felt completely different. Filipino supporters packed the stands, waved Philippine flags, shouted her name, and made it clear that they had traveled to Toronto specifically to see their rising star. Reports even noted that Eala had generated thousands of ticket sales on her own, helping push organizers to feature her on the main court. Suddenly, the tournament wasn't just about the biggest names in the draw. Eala had become one of the biggest attractions in the building. And then came the moment that really changed the conversation. Eala faced American Catty McNally in a dramatic three-set battle. The match was physical, emotional, and incredibly demanding. Eala eventually survived 6-3, 5-7, 6-4, and moved into the round of 16. But the victory came with a worrying development. During the match, Eala rolled her ankle after an awkward landing and needed attention before continuing. She somehow pushed through the pain and finished the match, but the physical toll was obvious. That win should have been nothing but good news. Instead, it created a huge question heading into the next round. Would Eala actually be healthy enough to continue? And that question mattered, because the next opponent was no ordinary player. Waiting on the other side of the net was Belinda Bencic, the former world number 4 and Olympic singles gold medalist. Bencic brought experience, tactical intelligence, and the kind of consistency that can punish even the smallest weakness. For Eala, already dealing with the physical demands of a packed schedule, it was a brutal test. There was another storyline surrounding the match, too. The crowd. Eala's supporters had become one of the defining features of her Toronto run. Some fans loved the energy. Others argued that certain spectators were getting too loud during points and needed to understand tennis etiquette. Social media discussions became increasingly focused on the atmosphere around Eala's matches, with some fans defending the passionate Filipino supporters and others criticizing the noise. That debate itself tells you something important. When fans are talking this much about a player's crowd, it means that player has become a major part of the event's identity. Then came the Bencic match. The first set was competitive, but Eala did not look like the same explosive player fans had watched earlier in the tournament. Her movement appeared restricted, her timing was not as sharp, and the injury from the McNally battle seemed to be affecting her ability to play freely. Bencic recognized the situation and applied pressure. Eala fought hard, but Bencic eventually took the opening set 6-4. And then the second set became extremely difficult to watch for Eala's supporters. Bencic took control, while Eala struggled to find her normal rhythm. The errors increased, her movement became more limited, and the match slipped away quickly. Bencic completed a 6-4, 6-0 victory, ending Eala's 7-match winning streak and sending her into the quarter-finals. For the fans who had filled the stadium and followed Eala's journey, it was a heartbreaking ending. But this is where the story gets bigger than one match. Because Eala had already changed the atmosphere around the National Bank Open, she showed what happens when a rising international star connects with a community that is hungry to see one of its own succeed at the highest level. The Philippine flags, the chants, the excitement, and the emotional reaction to every point made Eala's matches feel like major events within the event. And when that player is suddenly gone, the difference is noticeable. That's why some fans reacted so strongly after Eala's exit. It wasn't necessarily that the National Bank Open itself had suddenly become irrelevant. Far from it. The tournament still featured an elite field, including top seeds such as Aryna Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, Jessica Pegula, Coco Gauff, Iga Swiatek, Naomi Osaka, and Belinda Bencic. Eala herself entered as the number 25 seed. But tournaments are not only about rankings, they are about stories. They are about personalities. They are about players who create emotional connections with fans, and Eala had created exactly that kind of connection. There is also a broader issue surrounding this year's National Bank Open. The tournament had already dealt with several high-profile absences before the competition got underway. Karolina Muchova withdrew after undergoing a minor operation, Jasmine Paolini pulled out because of a foot injury, and other notable names were missing from the women's field. That meant the tournament was already entering the spotlight, with questions about which stars would actually be available. So when Eala finally left the tournament, fans had another reason to feel the difference, but calling the National Bank Open in trouble would be an exaggeration. The event still has plenty of star power, competitive matches, and major storylines. What Eala's absence really demonstrates is something much more interesting: the growing commercial and emotional value of emerging stars. A player doesn't need to be a Grand Slam champion to move people. Eala is proving that. She is still just 21, yet she has already become one of the most recognizable young players coming out of the Philippines. Her rise has attracted international attention, major wins, packed crowds, and passionate support. And every time she steps onto the court, more people are paying attention. That's a huge deal for women's tennis, and it's an even bigger deal for Filipino tennis. The National Bank Open may continue without her, but the impact of her Toronto run doesn't disappear when she leaves the draw. If anything, the reaction from fans shows how quickly Eala's presence can transform the atmosphere around an event. Now the big question is, what comes next? Eala's immediate priority should be recovery and preparation for the next part of the hardcourt season. With Cincinnati and the US Open ahead, there is no reason to panic over one disappointing result. In fact, if anything, Toronto gave Eala another valuable lesson about what it takes to compete deep into major WTA events while managing the physical demands of a packed schedule.